Good morning. I'm a lawyer, and one of the things I come in...
That's the punchline right there, isn't it?
Okay. I come in contact with a lot of mentally ill people. I was associated with a probate court recently. How does someone become so delusional that they begin to exist outside the bounds of what we would call a reasonable understanding of physical reality? Assuming perception is reality, and there is a great breadth of potential reality, these individuals seem to exist on the very fringes of probability.
Well, it's a really big question and would require a really long answer to satisfy it completely, but we can give you a sense of this. First, we want to say to you, nothing is true, but that someone's perception has not made it true. In other words, what you perceive and the reality that you expect eventually becomes your manifestational reality. So we liked your specific choice of words about on the outside boundaries of what the rest of us have sort of concluded is normal. There are large numbers of people who come forth, and in larger numbers now than we've ever seen before, who are not so willing to be compliant. They are understanding that they are creators, and they are really interested in discovering their own guidance system, and they're not so interested in being guided by those who clearly cannot guide them, and they are born with those powerful intentions. Let's say that you are born into a family who has very specific ways of going about things, and they've managed to have certain levels of success, and everybody's sort of proud of the way they live. And you are born into this family who now expect you to follow along the same lifestyle lines. Well, more and more people are finding incompliant people in their families because these energies that are coming forth are wanting to make the statement that variety is important and that conforming to somebody else's idea is setting aside your own guidance system and not allowing you to fulfill your reason for being. The perfect scenario from our point of view is you're born into this body, into a stable environment where you're cared for and loved and fed well. And out of the contrasting environment that surrounds you, you begin to add to the intentions that you held even before you came into this body. So you start amending your desires through the trial and error, through the give and take of your own life experience. And you begin saying, this is what I prefer, this is who I'm becoming. And source energy goes right along with that and becomes that. Then what life is really about is you now finding a way through trial and error again of closing that gap and becoming the person that your life experience has helped you to decide that you want to become. Well, if everyone was left to their own devices and you were wanting to feel good as you all are and you were just gravitating toward the thoughts and words and deeds that felt good, everyone would rather easily become the fulfiller of their own desires that are born out of their own life experience. But then imagine this youngster having this experience and launching these rockets of desires, being born in a very confining family that says, no, you don't get to play music just because you like it, and you don't get to play computer games just because you like it. Everybody in this family is a doctor, or everybody in this family has a college degree, and you must too. And so this person is asked to step outside of their own vibrational relativity guidance, and they find themselves trying to serve somebody else's intentions. Well, sometimes these energies or souls or whatever you want to call it are born with such intensity, with such a determination not to conform but to march to the beat of their own drum, that they manage to hold themselves apart only to bring upon themselves stronger reinforcements from those around them that are insistent that they conform. And the reason that there are so many masses around that are insisting that people conform, even as you asked the question, you made it sound like those that are on the inside of that are normal are the way we really want it to be. We really don't want them to be on the outside fringes of what we call normalcy, and we certainly understand that. So what happens is society sort of just wants that conformity too, and parents certainly want it, and teachers certainly want it. And the reason they do is because when you look at something that makes you feel good, you want more of it. You want to support it and vote for it and encourage it. When you look at something that makes you feel bad, you want it to go away. You want to get rid of it. And so most of humans are attempting to do the impossible, which is to modify or change the conditions so that people can have better feeling response to it. So there are huge movements that are trying to insist that people do conform. You talk about living in a free society, but there are so many demands that are made on so many of you. You are far from making decisions based upon what you want. The majority of your decisions are based upon how well somebody else will approve or applaud or appreciate or opposite of what you are doing. So now, what happens is someone who is a very strong energy, who has come forth with a deliberate intention to teach autonomy, to teach self-survival, to teach self-empowerment, is born into an environment where they are inspired to all kinds of things that are different than what most other people are inspired to. And when they attempt to go that way, society wants them not to in some way. And sometimes by society, it can just be a controlling mother, a very well-meaning mother who wants her child to fit in, or a very well-meaning teacher who wants the child to conform and be easier to handle. And if this energy has been born with a strong determination to do it, and they are constantly squelched, what happens is a part of their personality is contained, but an uncontainable part of their personality sort of spurts out. And then almost as soon as you contain that, it spurts out again. In other words, every bit of that is about this restless soul who wants to live his own different experience in a society that is so sure that his different experience will be a threat to them, that then they insist upon his conformity, but they can't manage it because he's going to find another way and another way and another way not to conform. His desire for freedom is so much stronger than any other instinct that he has that they cannot pound that square peg into that round hole.
Well, our response many times is to lock somebody up, is to take somebody and put them in an insane asylum.
Because they are less concerned about his well-being than they are about his response to their well-being. And that's all right, because everyone is selfishly wired. But what's really screwy about all of this is that the society at large and so many people involved don't realize that their well-being is not contingent upon what this person does or does not do. In other words, a teaching across the board of self-empowerment will cause them not to need to try to control the conditions for their own well-being. Can you see how as more and more people discover this emotional guidance scale, and as more and more people become consciously aware of their own emotional guidance system, and as more and more people discover that my personal happiness is not dependent upon anything that you do or don't do, now I'm finally for the first time free. And it isn't until I really feel free that I'm going to stop building jails and putting people in it that I fear threaten my freedom. That was good.
But we don't want them to hurt themselves either.
If someone were to press a pillow to your face, you'd do anything you could to get it off. And that's sort of the way they're feeling. They're feeling suffocated by an environment. And we don't mean to make it sound like there is someone else to blame. It's a misunderstanding all around. But no one hurts themselves who is allowed to have desires that they can gravitate toward. In other words, we promise you, we could interact with any one of these people who are at any place along that emotional scale. And with patience and time, we would first convince them that they are leading edge creators and that they are worthy. And then we would explain to them that the way they feel is everything, but that the way they feel can't be contingent upon how somebody else feels about them. Don't you think it's interesting that someone feeling utterly powerless what's almost the first thing they do if they feel they can get away with it? Don't they try to level the playing field by seeking revenge? In other words, isn't the knee-jerk response almost always anger? And the reason for that is because it's the closest thing to where they are vibrationally, and it does net them an improvement in feelings. So it is so intuitive and so instinctual to try to do that. But then society, who's so sure that everything needs to be just this way and so, sees this angry, rebellious, revengeful person and fears for its own well-being more than it does try to understand why this person's trying to get the pillow off its face, you see. And so society, who is not yet ready to understand about these laws, finds it easier to lock them up.
We do.
And we would find it much easier to set them free. So give us a scenario and we'll tell you exactly what we would do.
I had one recently who thought that she was married to 14 different men, George Bush being the last one that she married. And she also just inherited $197 trillion. I think that's what she said, trillion. And she owns all the steel companies in the United States. And she's, this delusional area that she's in is so broad that there's no way that I could find to help her.
All right, so here's what we would say. We would say to her, you're really on the right track because everything that you see in this universe was preceded by thought and expectation. And so as you've been living life and you've launched these rockets, you've done such a strong job of withdrawing your attention from what is and focusing your attention upon these things that you are desiring, that your vibration is more about what you're desiring than about what is. Now think about this in the context of what we're offering here, and then we'll really get specific about this situation. You hear us say, so here you stand and you launch a rocket of desire, and the universe does not know the difference between reality and what you perceive as reality, because the universe is responding to your vibration. So a person is sick and we say, well, let's imagine what it would be like to be well. Let's remember what it was like when you are well. Let's keep forking off in the direction of well. Let's just talk about wellness. Well, now that person's doctor would say, Abraham, you're asking this person to be delusional. You're not asking this person to face reality. You're asking this person to hold thoughts about a reality that is not. And we would say, yes, we are. If you only think about what is, you just keep regurgitating what is. You must turn your thoughts to what you are wanting. And so what's happening is there are people being born with this knowing that are trying to dovetail it into a society of suppression. In other words, we want your client, we want anyone to know the difference between what they are fantasizing or visualizing and imagining and what actually is happening. In other words, we don't think that it is healthy for this person to really think she has 14 husbands and to really think that she owns all the steel mills. But we do not think that there's anything wrong with her fantasizing about that. And so we would work to not make her feel that she is delusional and wrong to think those thoughts. We would be working to say anything that you think will eventually, the essence of it will eventually come into fruition, you see. If you want it and can bring yourself into vibrational belief, the essence of it must come. Why do you think that she would visualize or announce or believe that she is married to George Bush?
Why do I think that? Probably because it's a result of medicine.
But why would it squirt out in that way? In other words, what's she living in her life? We'll tell you what it feels to us. She is someone who feels powerless, seeking power. So she has found who she considers and who she hears to be the most powerful man in the world, and she has coupled herself with that person. And she probably had very powerful people in her life in the beginning who would not allow her to have her own thoughts. In other words, there is always something like that at the beginning. And it is not unusual for someone who feels suppressed to then seek out something like the people who have suppressed them in order to give them back the life that they were getting from that. In other words, it's a very common thing for people to have a very suppressed experience and then look to those people who have suppressed them as something that is a good thing rather than a bad thing, because during the process of suppression, they became completely disempowered and came to believe in the power of the one who suppressed them. So that's what's happened to this person, and that's why now she is having dreams of grandeur. That's why she is coupling herself with powerful people.